You're watching UATV News. My name is Ina Kosinska. Good evening. The time has come to substantively negotiate on the situation in Donbass, and Ukraine is ready for the necessary decisions during the new summit of Normandy Four leaders. This was stated by Volodymyr Zelenskyy at a meeting with advisors to presidents of Ukraine, France and Germany. Our country remains committed to the political and diplomatic path of settlement, the Ukrainian president underlined. The parties agreed to continue negotiations at the level of advisors to organize the next summit of the countries participating in the Normandy format leaders. The consequences of a possible invasion to Ukraine will be much more severe for Russia than in 2014 after the occupation of Crimea. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman announced this after talks in Geneva. Without detailing, she noted that the new sanctions could include export restrictions as well as financial measures against key Russian institutions. At the same time, the Deputy Secretary of State emphasized that NATO's doors remain open to Ukraine.
We will not allow anyone to slam closed NATO's open-door policy, which has always been central to the NATO alliance. We will not forego bilateral cooperation with sovereign states that wish to work with the United States. And we will not make decisions about Ukraine without Ukraine, about Europe without Europe, or about NATO without NATO. As we say to our allies and partners, nothing about you without you.
Meanwhile, the United States expressed concern that Russia could spread disinformation about the accords following the Geneva talks. This was stated by the press secretary of the White House, Jen Psaki. She called on not to succumb to possible Kremlin's attempts to mislead.
We are preparing ourselves for the possibility and likelihood, no one should be surprised, I should say, if Russia spreads disinformation about commitments that have not been made, or if it goes even further and instigates something as a pretext for further destabilizing activity. And so we would continue to urge everyone not to fall for any attempts to push disinformation out there. But for the president, the most important thing to convey, and that he's conveying to his team, is that no talks about Europe without Europe, no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine.
The Kremlin is not planning a full-scale invasion into Ukraine. This opinion was expressed by the former deputy of the State Duma of the Russian Federation, Ilya Ponomaryov, on the air of the Ukrainian Fact program on our TV channel. According to him, Russian President Vladimir Putin is seeking to maintain influence in the post-Soviet space, and today his main goal is Belarus.
Для Путина the
same for Putin, there is sense in the capture of Belarus, in aggressive and tough actions in Kazakhstan in relation to Ukraine, and so on. But they also need to explain somehow to their citizens and their relatives who live there why is Russia sending troops and its other activities. So the explanation will be the following. Say, you see, there is an aggressive bloc, the enemy is at the gates, we are threatened, we are only defending ourselves, we are only responding to actions that are not carried out by us at all.
During tomorrow's Russia-NATO Council, UK and its allies intend to declare that the Kremlin's military buildup on the border with Ukraine is unacceptable. This is announced in a statement by British Foreign Office. It is noted that London is united with its allies and partners in condemning the behavior of Russia and requires to fulfill obligations taken in Helsinki, Budapest and Minsk.
Russia must stop its acts of aggression and pursue a path of diplomacy. Any military incursion into Ukraine would be a massive strategic mistake with severe costs, from the statement on the website of the UK Foreign Office.
10,000 servicemen will join the brigades and battalions of territorial defense in peacetime, but if necessary, the number can be rapidly increased. Commander of the Territorial Defense Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Yuri Galushkin, told this. In total, 4 regional departments and 25 brigades will be created in Ukraine, that is, in every regional center and in Kyiv. In turn, each of them will include from 4 to 10 separate battalions in every district.
Those are organizational nuclear that are able to deploy and provide weapons and logistics units to wartime staff. Thus, in a short period of time, several 100,000 reservists will be able to significantly enforce the territorial defense forces.
The TV channels were not arrested. The assets of Ukrainian Channel 5 and the Primy weren't arrested within the treason case involving former Ukrainian president and incumbent MP Petro Poroshenko. This was stated by State Bureau of Investigations. While the MP's defense declares that the court deliberately froze assets that do not belong to Poroshenko. Our correspondents will tell you the details.
On the 20th of December, State Bureau of Investigations declared suspicion of high treason to Petro Poroshenko. It goes about the alleged coal smuggling from certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions back in 2014 during Poroshenko's presidential tenure. On January the 6th, the Prechersk District Court of Kiev froze all his property and assets. Those are real estate and movable property, apartments, paintings, a house and corporate rights to facilities. Among other, Petro Poroshenko's shares in two companies were frozen: the limited liability TV company Avtor TV and subsidiary TV and radio company NBM Zaporizhzhia. However, as the MP's lawyer Igor Holovan posted on Facebook, Petro Poroshenko does not own the assets specified in the decision.
The subsidiary TV and radio company NBM Zaporizhzhia and limited liability TV company Avtor TV, those are companies directly related to the broadcasting of opposition TV channels programs. But Petro Poroshenko's share in the chapter capital of those legal entities has long been gone. Petro Poroshenko has publicly passed those assets to the limited liability company Free Media, which was founded by a dozen of well-known journalists and MPs. Igor Holovan, lawyer to MP of Ukraine Petro Poroshenko, in Facebook.
However, the State Bureau of Investigations states that the assets freeze did not affect the broadcasting of the TV channels.
The court allegedly froze the assets of Channel 5 and the Primy TV channels, which are owned by the Free Media Holding. The State Bureau of Investigations claims that this information is manipulative and untrue. Both channels are free to continue their work and cover issues relevant for our country. The arrest of these channels, corporate rights and their assets was not imposed.
They also claim in the agency that the court froze only Poroshenko's property that belongs to him based on the data from registers, and the assets of the Channel 5 and the Primy TV channels are not among them. MP's lawyers report that they plan to appeal against the decision of freeze assets, as well as appeal to the European Court of Human Rights, reported by Nick Starkov and Larissa Zubenko, UATV News.
MP Victor Muvichuk will remain under house arrest until March 10th. The Pechersk District Court of Kiev extended restraint at the prosecution's request. Medvedchuk is suspected of treason and assistance to terrorist organizations. The Office of the Prosecutor General explained that the law permits keeping under house arrest during the pretrial investigation for no more than 6 months. In relation to the MP, this preventive measure was first imposed on October 12 last year. Thus, the term of Medvedchuk's stay under house arrest will make about 5 months. Ukraine is sufficiently provided with gas and coal for the winter heating season. Minister of Energy of Ukraine, Herman Halushenko, stressed that power outages during this period can only be an emergency. And the ministry, together with the regulatory authorities, constantly warns private structures about the inadmissibility of shutdowns in connection with scheduled repairs.
There is a reserve in the power system. There are no risks and no grounds for outages except for accidents. And we said that again, the scheduled repairs during the winter heating period should not take place. From our part, we will communicate in an appropriate manner and carry out appropriate work so that the scheduled repairs during the heating season do not occur.
Residents of the eastern Ukraine city of Toretsk live without water supply for the 3rd week in a row. The cutoff happened on the non-government controlled territory. Since then, the city receives twice cut the norm of water per day. Every day, the city has to acquire 14,000 cubic meters of water. The setback may be resolved only after the illegal armed groups provide the security guarantees. 3 weeks after, the emergency is still pending to settle. Details next.
Since the end of December, residents of eastern Ukrainian city of Toretsk have been living without a centralized water supply. The reason is an emergency at the Holivka-Toretsk water main. Several minor bursts were repaired in the government-controlled territory of Ukraine, while the main cutoff is located behind the contact line. Residents are not surprised by the event. They say that the water pipe has not been repaired for many years.
It's as old as me and probably even older than me, since I remember those pipes since childhood.
The exhausted water supply system is duly fixed within the city limits. But as the workers of the water utility say, by no chance it is possible to send the repair team closer to the contact line. There is only a 6 kilometers distance between the positions of Ukrainian servicemen and ones of the illegal armed groups. To localize an accident, an agreement on a joint ceasefire is required.
The cut-off spot is located in the so-called grey zone on the open terrain. Unfortunately, the non-government-controlled side has still not provided the ceasefire. Emergency teams are on alert to rush the damage repair and for water on.
While the issue of security guarantees is being settled, water is brought to people with 10 cars. The water is supplied from the neighboring town of Konstantinivka by the effort of the Ukrainian Army.
Why not to say it's mineralized, the place of boring? Well, anyway, citizens are grateful for the clean water.
Residents of the apartments buildings receive water within the timetable. They try to stock up as many for several days.
Usually I get 2 full buckets and a 8-liter nylon tank. Still, it is not enough to clean and wash things. Where cotton needs to save more. It is the only option.
Local officials bought additional capacity for the provision of retired persons and people with disabilities.
More than 500 100-liter tanks were provided last year. We gave it to people with low income, retired and people with special needs living in the multi-story buildings.
The water supply emergency occurred on the 27th of December. Some of the breakthroughs were eliminated, given a security guarantee that were settled for the period till the 31st of December to repair the main cutoff, which is located near the town of Horlivka, uncontrolled by Ukraine. A new ceasefire needs to be settled. The opposite side has yet to provide security guarantees, reported by Nick Starkov, Alena Hramova, UATV News.
The salaries of the Ukrainian law enforcement will increase starting February. This was announced by Minister of Internal Affairs Denis Monastyrsky. According to him, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy instructed the government to increase by 10% the salaries of employees of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of all categories, both policemen and rescuers, border guards, national guards and employees of the Migration Service. Monastyrsky recalled that the budgets of the last 2 years did not include the corresponding funds and additional payments were made point-wise. The money for raising of salaries this year was obtained due to last year's special operation against the illegal sale of accessible goods, and the minister said. Almost 5,500 new cases of COVID-19 were registered in Ukraine over the past day. According to the Ministry of Health, most of the cases were registered in the capital, almost 1,200 people. Sumy and Kherson regions are now in the orange quarantine zone. The rest are in the yellow one. Together we are united. An inclusive festival of creativity takes place in the city of Mariupol in eastern Ukraine. The qualifying round in 6 nominations took place in spring of 2021. 14 winners will perform at the gala concert. Organizers said that the main goal of the festival is to attract people with disabilities to the creative life of the city as much as possible. My colleagues saw how the finalists rehearse.
Participants of the inclusive festival, Pavlo and Olha, have Down syndrome. They have been rehearsing waltz for a year with the choreographer and volunteers.
All the guys and girls are very creative, but in their own way. Everyone wants to be able to self-actualize, show their skills. Therefore, sometimes we have difficulties with them, but nevertheless, they are great.
Festival Together We Are United takes place in Mariupol for the second time within the framework of the City Target Program of Support, Adaptation and Vocational Guidance for Children and Youth with Disabilities.
In total, we have 6 nominations this year. Those are vocal and choral genre, choreography, instrumental performance, recitation and theatrical art, original genre and applied arts.
14 participants will perform at the final gala concert. They will appear on the stage together with creative teams of the city.
They will show others that one can live with such diseases, one can create, one can enjoy life in general.
The participants have less than 2 weeks left for rehearsals. Gala concert of the festival Together We Are United will take place on the 22nd of January, reported by Nick Starkov and Nadia Sukharukova, UATV News.
That's all for this hour. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook pages. Thank you for staying with the UATV channel. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.